You think you see the world clearly. You don't. Your brain is running a set of predictable errors right now, and every one of them is a lever that someone who understands it can pull to move you exactly where they want. Psychology has a polite name for these errors. It calls them cognitive biases, and it presents them as harmless quirks. Little glitches in human thinking, interesting to know about. That framing is comforting, and it's wrong. These aren't quirks. They're the buttons on the outside of you. They are the precise, reliable ways your judgment can be bent. By a salesman, by a boss, by a headline, by a crowd, and most often by yourself. And the reason they're so dangerous is that you can't feel them working. A bias doesn't feel like an error. It feels like the truth. Modern researchers started mapping these in the last century and acted like they'd discovered something new. They hadn't. 2,300 years ago, a Chinese philosopher had already built an entire theory of power on the assumption that human judgment is predictably broken, that people don't reason clearly, they reason in patterns, and whoever knows the patterns can use them. His name was Han Fei. Historians call him the Chinese Machiavelli, except he came 1,500 years before Machiavelli was born, and he was colder. He didn't study these errors to fix them. He studied them because a ruler who understands how people's minds bend is a ruler who cannot be fooled and can never be surprised. That's what we do here. We take the oldest strategic minds in the world and use them on the life you're actually living. Ancient answers to modern walls. If that's useful, subscribe. Now let's walk through the errors running your mind and the cold way to see them. The first and the most quietly devastating is confirmation bias. You do not see the world. You see the version of it that agrees with what you already believe. Evidence that confirms you gets waved through without inspection. Evidence that contradicts you gets interrogated until it confesses or dies. You think you're weighing reality. You're building a case for a verdict you reached before the trial started. Han Fei understood the ruler's version of this perfectly, and it terrified him. He warned that a powerful man is surrounded by people telling him what he wants to hear, and that the more powerful he becomes, the more perfectly sealed inside his own preferred version of reality he gets. Because no one dares contradict him, and he doesn't want them to anyway. The result is a man who feels more certain and sees less clearly at exactly the same time. That's not just kings. That's you, every time you go looking for opinions that agree with you and call it research. The cold move here is brutal and simple. Actively hunt for the evidence that you're wrong, not to torture yourself, to see. The person who can genuinely seek out what contradicts them has a superpower almost no one has. They can actually update. Everyone else is just defending. The second error is the sunk cost fallacy, and it has ruined more lives than almost any other. It's the pull to keep pouring resources into something, a job, a relationship, a business, a plan. Not because it's working, but because you've already put so much in. The years you've spent become the reason you spend more years. The money already lost becomes the argument for losing more. You're not deciding based on the future. You're being dragged backward by the past. Han Fei told a story about exactly this shape of error. A farmer saw a rabbit run into a tree stump and break its neck. Free meal. So he abandoned his field and sat by that stump, waiting for the next rabbit, and starved while the whole state laughed at him. His point was permanent. The past is not a strategy. What you already invested is gone. It's gone whether you continue or stop. The only real question is whether the next hour, the next dollar, the next year spent from here is worth it going forward. The sunk cost is silent on that question. It just tugs at you, whispering that quitting would waste everything, when the truth is the waste already happened, and continuing only adds to it. The cold move. Ask not, how much have I put in, but If I were starting fresh today, knowing what I know, would I choose this? If the answer is no, the years behind you don't change it. The third error is the most important one Han Fei ever exploited, because it's the biggest handle anyone has on you: loss aversion. The research is clear and a little humbling. The pain of losing something is roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining the same thing. You will fight harder to avoid losing 100 than to win 100. Fear of loss moves you more than hope of gain. Always. Now hear that through Han Fei. His entire system of control ran on two handles: reward and punishment, and he knew which one was stronger. What a person is afraid to lose is the rope you can always pull. The employee who's terrified of losing the paycheck will accept almost anything. The person afraid of losing the relationship will tolerate almost anything. The investor who can't stand to realize a loss holds the sinking thing all the way down. In every case, the fear of loss overrides clear judgment, and anyone who can see what you're afraid to lose can see exactly how to move you. This is why the person who has made peace with losing, the job, the deal, the approval, the outcome, becomes almost impossible to control. Not because they don't care, because the handle isn't there to grab. The cold move. Find the thing you're most afraid to lose and ask whether that fear is making your decisions for you. Very often it is, and it's not even choosing well. Pause for a second and be honest. What are you continuing right now? A job, a project, a relationship? Mainly because of what you've already put in, or because you're afraid of the loss, rather than because it's genuinely your best path forward. Just name it. One word, hold it, because the biases don't announce themselves. They feel exactly like good reasons. The fourth error is anchoring, and this one costs you money directly. The first number in any negotiation sets the frame, and everything afterward is measured against it, even when you know the number is arbitrary. The first price said out loud quietly hijacks the entire range of what feels reasonable. This is why whoever names the figure first often wins, and why the person who waits for the other side to open has already surrendered the ground. You think you're evaluating the offer. You're actually just negotiating a distance from a number someone else chose for you. The cold move is to know it's happening, to notice when a number has been dropped to anchor you, and to refuse to treat it as the center of gravity, and when it matters, to set the anchor yourself. First, deliberately. The fifth error is the herd. Social proof. The deep instinct to treat everyone is doing it as evidence that it's right. It was useful when the herd running meant a predator was coming. It's a catastrophe in a market, a trend, or a crowd, because the crowd is subject to every bias on this list at once, amplified. The people who lose the most money buy what everyone's buying at the top and sell what everyone's selling at the bottom, moved entirely by the motion of the mass. Han Fei had no illusions about crowds. He trusted structure and evidence, never the mood of the many. The cold move. Treat everyone's doing it as neutral information at best, and often as a warning. The fact that a crowd is running tells you the crowd is running. It tells you nothing about whether they're running the right way. Now, I have to be clear, because this knowledge has a dark use, and I'm not handing you that. Everything I just described can be turned into a manual for manipulation, and plenty of people use it exactly that way. They anchor you on purpose. They exploit your loss aversion on purpose. They feed your confirmation bias to keep you loyal. That's not what this is for. Knowing these patterns is armor, not a weapon. The point is to stop being the one who gets moved, to see the lever the moment someone reaches for it, and to catch yourself in the act of fooling yourself. Turning this into a way to prey on other people's blind spots doesn't make you a strategist. It makes you the kind of person Han Fei was warning everyone else about. And those people in his world and ours tend to be seen coming eventually and dealt with. Here's the truth underneath all of it. You will never fully delete these biases. They're built in too deep. But there is an enormous difference between a person run by errors they can't see and a person who knows the errors are there and watches for them. The first is moved all day long and calls it his own free choice. The second catches the bias in the act. Not every time, but often enough to change the shape of a life. The goal was never a perfect mind. It's a mind that can see itself being fooled. So let's go back to where we started. Certain you see clearly, while 5 predictable errors quietly bend your judgment and hand levers to everyone around you. You were never stupid. You were running the same broken software as every other human being, with one difference that's entirely in your control, whether you know it's running. The person who knows can pause, question the certainty, hunt for the disconfirming fact, name the fear, ignore the anchor, and step out of the herd. Not perfectly, just enough to stop being so easy to move. So don't think about how to be smarter. Think about who you're becoming, not the person who mistakes his own biases for clear sight and gets steered through his whole life by levers he never noticed. The one who learned to watch his own mind and became, quietly, very hard to fool. And here's the thing. Han Fei was one of an entire generation of Chinese minds who saw human nature without illusion, who understood, long before psychology gave it names, that people run on predictable errors and that clarity about those errors is a kind of power. We're decoding every one of them, one mind at a time. If this showed you even one lever that's been moving you without your knowing, then you already understand why most people will spend their whole lives certain they're thinking clearly and being moved anyway. A few will learn to watch the machine, decide which one you are,